So, what makes the state of Ohio so special? Known as the Buckeye State, Ohio was the 17th state to enter the Union, having done so in 1803. There are a lot of interesting facts about this populous state. And, in this video, we will examine those facts, along with fascinating stories, and other truths about the state of Ohio, some of which you may or may not already know. But before we begin, if you like this video, please click the like button and please subscribe to our channel, as this will help the algorithm, and it will also enable you to be the first to see more videos, just like this one. Back in the early days of the United States, prior, even to the Revolutionary War, Ohio was part of the Northwest Territories. But before the first European settler came to Ohio, the land was inhabited for thousands of years by Native Americans. You can see the mark that these prehistoric native tribes had on the land. The remnants of their time in this area are seen through the great earthwork settlements and massive mounds. Among these great ancient mounds is the Serpentine Mound, which is located in Adams County. The Serpentine Mound is considered the largest effigy mound of its kind and was created by the Hopewell tribes. The mounds were used as astronomical observatories and places of ritual celebrations, and were considered sacred burial sites. The Hopewell tribes were part of the ancient Adena culture, which died out over 1,500 years before the first white settler ever came to Ohio. After that, the original inhabitants of Ohio consisted mainly of three nations: the Erie, the Kickapoo, and the Shawnee. The Erie tribe settled in northeast Ohio. Their tribal history is not well recorded, but they shared the same language with the Iroquois and the Seneca tribes, who lived in New York and Pennsylvania. The Erie tribe was completely wiped out by the Iroquois in a major land dispute. The word Ohio comes from the Iroquois, Oyo, or as interpreted in English, is Great River. The first Europeans to come to the Ohio area were French traders. They arrived in the early 1700s. At that time the French, and a few American and British traders, engaged with the native peoples like the Shawnee. They traded furs, such as beaver pelts, and other goods with the native population. The first American settlers to come to the region arrived shortly after the Revolutionary War. It was decided by Congress that Ohio would be prohibited from any slave trading or commerce of that kind. That decree made the Northwest Territory and Ohio, itself, a free region. This would eventually become very important, as Ohio became a stop on the Freedom Trail and the Underground Railroad. Ohio was also a hotbed of activity for abolitionists wanting to end slavery in the country. The white settlers who made Ohio their new home emigrated from New England and the northeastern states, such as New York and Pennsylvania. The first town to be settled by New Englanders in Ohio was Marietta, which was located near the Ohio River. Many more early pioneers came, including from the state of Connecticut, where land was given to the state by the United States government, establishing the Western Reserve area. The Connecticut Western Reserve was located in northeast Ohio closer to Lake Erie. Moses Cleveland arrived with a small group of surveyors to survey the Western Reserve area. He created a new town by the edge of Lake Erie and the Cuyahoga River that would be given his name and was called Cleveland, Ohio. Yet, almost as soon as the white settlers arrived, there was immediate strife between them and the native peoples. The conflicts between the natives and the settlers soon led to the Northwest Indian Wars. The Northwest Indian Wars happened only a few years after the end of the Revolutionary War. The result of the ensuing battles eventually led to the native peoples being conquered by General Anthony Wayne at the Battle of Foreland Timbers in 1794, near the Toledo area. The defeated natives ceded much of present-day Ohio to the United States, with the signing of the Treaty of Greenville in 1795. By 1801, Ohio's population grew to 45,000. And in 1803, Ohio was made a state. Chillicothe, Ohio was the first state capital. It remained the state capital from 1803 to 1810. The state capital was then moved to Zanesville. Soon after that, the city of Columbus was built from the ground up, with the intent of making it the permanent Ohio state capital. The building of Columbus began in 1812. Prior to the Civil War, Ohio was mainly dotted with small towns. Farming and shipping were its two main industries. The Ohio and Erie, and the Miami and Erie canals were built in 1825. And this succeeded in building up industry within the state. The building of the canals also brought in a new influx of immigrants to the state. Trains began to dominate starting in 1835 with the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad becoming the first United States railway chartered for commercial transportation of both freight and passengers. This made the canals obsolete and helped to make industry flourish within the entire state of Ohio. By the end of the Civil War, Ohio became one of the most populous and one of the most wealthiest states in the Union. Some interesting things of note about Ohio. First, Ohio's flag is one of the more unique flags in the United States. It is not rectangular, like most other states. Instead, it has a pennant design. According to its design, the flag is to be folded 17 times, to represent the fact that Ohio is the 17th state in the Union. Ohio uses the slogan, "The heart of it all." This isn't simply a random slogan meant to promote tourism but is actually about the fact that around 50% of the United States population is located within 500 miles of the city of Columbus, making, in essence, Columbus, and thereby Ohio, the heart of the country. There were 8 presidents that came from Ohio. Only 2 other states come close to that number, and those are Virginia and New York. The Ohio presidents include Ulysses S. Grant, William Henry Harrison, Rutherford B. Hayes, James Garfield, Benjamin Harrison, William Kinley, William H. Taft, and Warren G. Harding. Another thing Ohio has an abundance of is astronauts. 25 astronauts have come from Ohio. Ohio astronauts have made almost 80 space flights in total. 3 of those flights were to the moon. The most famous of these astronauts include John Glenn, who was the first American to orbit the Earth 3 times. Neil Armstrong, who was the first man to land on the moon. Jim Lovell, who flew in for space flights, including as commander of the infamous Apollo 13 space mission that almost ended in tragedy. And Judith Resnick, one of the first women in space. She flew on the first voyage of the Space Shuttle, Discovery. And she died tragically on the ill-fated Space Shuttle, Challenger. Some more interesting facts about Ohio. Oberlin College, located in Oberlin, Ohio, was founded in 1833. It was the first interracial and coeducational college in the United States. Wilbur and Orville Wright, who owned a bicycle shop in Dayton, Ohio, were the first to successfully fly a plane. They completed their successful flight on the sandy beaches of Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. Later, the Wright brothers flew several other flights near their home in Dayton. The landing strip they used in Dayton is now part of the Air Force Museum. Akron, Ohio was considered the hub of tire making for many decades. It was called the rubber capital of the world. Famous tire companies that started in Akron were Goodyear, B.F. Goodrich, Firestone, and General Tire. In the late 1800s, through to the early 1900s, Cleveland, Ohio was the hub of automaking. At that time, automobiles were just starting to become popular. The autos made by the Cleveland automakers were generally made one at a time, to consumers who could afford their hefty price tag. This was before the introduction of the assembly line by Henry Ford. The big automakers of Cleveland, Ohio were Baker Motors, Packard Motor Company, the White Motor Company, Peerless Motors, the Winton Motor Company, and the Chandler Motor Company, among a multitude of others. Other automobile-related firsts that started in Ohio included the first automobile starter, which was created by Charles Kettering. Before Kettering's invention, all autos had to be cranked by hand in order to get started up. And the first traffic signal, which was created by African-American inventor Garrett Morgan. Morgan's first traffic signal stood at the corner of Euclid Avenue and East 55th Streets, located in the heart of Cleveland, Ohio. As a side note, Morgan was also the creator of the gas mask. The first portable vacuum cleaner was created by an asthmatic janitor who lived and worked in Canton, Ohio. His name was Murray Spangler. Spangler created a broom-like electric stick that a person could carry around and use with more ease while doing their vacuuming chores. Before his practical invention, all vacuum cleaners were quite cumbersome. Most were quite large, filling up an entire room, not very practical, and very expensive. Spangler sold his invention to William Hoover in 1908. Hoover used Spangler's innovative creation to create his own line of portable vacuum cleaners. Hoover's vacuum cleaner became synonymous with the popular cleaning tool. The first mechanical cash register was created by Dayton native James Ritty. It was nicknamed the incorruptible cash register. His invention also included that very familiar bell, or ding sound, that we all ascribe to a cash register. In fact, that ding, or sound, was advertised as the bell heard round the world. William Semple of Mount Vernon, Ohio, got the first U.S. patent for chewing gum. His process of making chewing gum involved dissolving vegetable gums in naphtha and alcohol, until they reached the consistency of jelly. Then, Semple mixed in powdered chalk, powdered licorice root, and other materials that were meant for consistency and flavor. Semple thought that people would buy his gum, not only for the fun of chewing it, but also to help keep their teeth clean and their breath fresh, hence the addition of chalk. Another Ohioan, Dr. Edward Beeman, gave the world one of the most popular chewing gums, which he called Beeman Pepside Chewing Gum. Beeman's chewing gum is still very popular to this day. Speaking of sweet and popular treats, Clarence Crane of Cleveland, Ohio, created the popular hard candy that we all know and love, Lifesavers. When he introduced Lifesavers, it was considered a summer treat, as the candy was specifically created to not melt in the sun during the heat of the summer. In 1926, Sam Stein, a coffee salesman from Cleveland, wanted to help busy chefs who were struggling with serving their impatient customers, especially during the lunch and dinner rush. Stein created a pre-made burger patty, which helped to cut down on prep time for these busy chefs and diner cooks. Charles Brush of Cleveland invented the first arc lamp in 1879. The arc lamp was a big step up from the gas lamps that were very popular and used in every major city during this time in the Victorian era. Brush set up around 20 of these arc lamps in the center of downtown Cleveland, in what is now known as Public Square, but at that time was called Monumental Park. He set up the lamps on April 28, 1879. People from all around the city came to witness the spectacle. They had never seen such a thing, and they were not sure what to expect. Many people who came thought the lights would turn the dark sky into daylight. And though it was a truly dramatic moment, it didn't quite light up the sky that dramatically. But, nevertheless, the city of Cleveland was very impressed with Brush's new technology. And Cleveland became the first place in the world to have electric street lights. Brush's arc lamp was an immediate sensation. It was quickly picked up by other major cities around the world, all of who wanted to have the same street lights for their own town. Thomas Edison, who invented the incandescent light bulb, and who would eventually surpass Brush in lighting the world, was a native of Milan, Ohio. His childhood home is now a tourist destination. John D. Rockefeller, who was a titan of industry, grew up and lived most of his life in Cleveland, Ohio. He started one of the first oil refineries, placing it on the banks of the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland. He remained an influential force throughout his time in Cleveland, and well after he left Cleveland to live out his elder years in New York. You can find his tombstone, where he is buried at Lakeview Cemetery in the city of Cleveland. In the 1850s, Ferdinand Shoemaker and Robert Stewart founded the Oat Mills Company in Akron, Ohio. They created a rolled oat cereal. This very popular cereal had the famous logo of the Quaker William Penn on the box. The Oats Mills Company eventually changed their name, becoming the Quaker Oats Company. The Ohio State Penitentiary, which operated from 1834 to 1984, housed some very infamous individuals throughout its time. These famous inmates included John Hunt Morgan, who was a Civil War prisoner, and who was infamous for his Civil War campaign known as Morgan's Raid. Morgan was captured and sent to the Ohio State Penitentiary, where he and 6 of his fellow Confederate inmates escaped the prison by digging a tunnel from their cell to the inner yard of the prison, kind of in the style of the movie The Shawshank Redemption, which, in a funny aside, was filmed at the Mansfield Reformatory, another prison nearby the Ohio State Penitentiary. Another famous inmate was George Bugs Moran. Moran was the main target of the infamous Valentine's Day Massacre in Chicago. Moran missed being shot and killed that day, but 7 of his fellow gang members were not so lucky. Also, at the Ohio State Penitentiary was Dr. Sam Shepard. Shepard was a native of Bay Village, Ohio. He was accused, and subsequently convicted of murdering his wife. Sam Shepard was the inspiration for the character of Dr. Richard Kimball in the television series and movie The Fugitive. And then there was William Sidney Porter, another inmate who was sent to the Ohio State Reformatory who was there serving out his sentence for embezzlement. While in prison, Porter created his moniker of the author O. Henry. He wrote a few stories while incarcerated under the O. Henry pen name. But, later, after he left prison, he would write some very famous stories, including his most famous, The Gift of the Magi. But, certainly the most odd inmate that spent their time at the Ohio State Penitentiary was someone known as the prison demon. Back in the 1800s, the prison demon was brought to the penitentiary for killing and then drinking the blood of his victims. Something very disturbing and completely unheard of at the time. He caught the attention of Bram Stoker, who happened to be in the Columbus area while the prison demon was serving his time. Stoker was in Columbus working with a local theater company. In that time, Stoker was in the process of doing research for a book he was writing. He already got inspiration from other sources, other real-life characters, all of which helped him to develop the main character of his new story. One of these real-life individuals included Vlad the Impaler of Romania. But Stoker was quite fascinated with the story of the prison demon. In fact, he used aspects of the prison demon's odd behavior to help with the development of his character, especially the idea of sucking a victim's blood, which became what set his character apart from other characters in popular fiction. We know this character now as the very famous Dracula. Another interesting fact about Ohio is that Alcoholics Anonymous was created in 1935 in Akron, Ohio. The first AA meeting took place with only 3 people in attendance. This included a New York stockbroker by the name of Bill W. and Akron surgeon Dr. Bob Smith. The meeting was held in the home of the third attendee, Harrietta Seiberling, the daughter of F.A. Seiberling, the founder of Goodyear Tire. The first meeting was held in the Gate Lodge of Stan Hewitt Hall, the Seiberling residence and Grand Estate. Ohio is home to several Hall of Fame museums. These include the Football Hall of Fame in Canton, the National Aviation Hall of Fame in Dayton, the Pulcher Hall of Fame in Euclid, and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland. If you drive along Route 16, and Ohio Route 146 in Newark, Ohio, you won't be able to miss the iconic Basket Building. This building once housed the headquarters of the Longaberger Basket Company. In 1919, J.W. Longaberger began an apprenticeship at the Dresden Basket Company in Dresden, Ohio. After the company failed due to the Great Depression, Longaberger continued making his own baskets on weekends. Longaberger eventually managed to save enough money to purchase the Dresden Basket Factory, starting his own basket company. Longaberger began selling his baskets through home shows, using the multi-level marketing model. Each basket he sold was made by hand and signed by the basket maker. They were immensely popular, so much so, that at its peak, the Longaberger Basket Company employed more than 8,200 people, not including their direct sales consultants. The Academy Awards, the Emmy Awards, and the NAACP Image Awards all used gift baskets made by Longaberger. The Longaberger Basket Building was built in the 1990s. It was meant to resemble one of the company's baskets. The basket handle weighs over 150 tons, and can be heated during cold weather to prevent ice from falling onto the building's glass roof. Longaberger filed for bankruptcy in 2018. The company sold the basket building. They petitioned Heritage Ohio, the state's official historic preservation organization, to make the basket building a historically registered building. During the height of the Gilded Era, Cleveland was home to some of the most powerful and influential industrialists in the world. At one time, Cleveland's Euclid Avenue was dubbed the showplace of America for its beautiful elm-lined sidewalks and lavish gardens that stood among ornate mansions. The concentration of wealth in one location was unparalleled, with accounts at that time comparing Euclid Avenue to the Champs-Élysées in Paris. The upper class of the city of Cleveland wanted to create a unique shopping center that would highlight the city's wealth. They borrowed the design of this new shopping plaza from the Galleria Vittorio Emanuele, located in Milan, Italy. The result was quite spectacular, with a complex of 3 structures, 2 9-story office buildings that housed a number of shops and were connected by a 5-story, iron and glass enclosed arcade. It faced both Euclid Avenue on one side and Superior Avenue on the other. It opened on Memorial Day, 1890. It was the first enclosed shopping center in the United States. It was nicknamed the Crystal Palace for its remarkable beauty. Time hasn't always been kind to this spectacular building. It had its downfall in the 1960s, through the 1980s, but was restored to its original beauty in the early 2000s. The Crystal Palace is now affectionately called the Old Arcade by the city's locals. In 1898, James and Abraham Stouffer started the Stouffer Cottage Creamery Company at the Sheriff Street sale that was located in downtown Cleveland. A few years after that, the Stouffer family established the Medina Creamery Company in Medina, Ohio in 1905. The family moved the creamery company from Medina to Cleveland in 1912. By the mid-1910s, the creamery became the largest manufacturer of creamery products in the city of Cleveland. In 1922, Abraham Stouffer and his wife Lena took over one of the creamery company's milk stands that was located on the lower level of the Cleveland Arcade. They converted the stand into a restaurant serving sandwiches and Lena's homemade Dutch apple pie. It was said that her Dutch apple pie was so good that it was the main reason the restaurant became so successful. They called the restaurant Stouffer's Lunch. By 1929, they had expanded their business so much that they were able to take it public as Stouffer Corporation, and they made Abraham Stouffer the chairman of the board. They expanded into other markets, like Detroit and Pittsburgh, and by 1936, Stouffers had their first restaurant in New York City. By 1946, they entered into the frozen food business. And in 1956 the company was formally renamed Stouffer Foods Corporation. Stouffers expanded their reach with restaurants throughout the country, including at Disneyland and Disney World, and they opened several hotels, including one at Cleveland's Terminal Tower Complex. In 1966, Stouffer's frozen foods division moved to Solon, Ohio, where it remains today. The company was eventually sold to the Nestlé Corporation, and is one of the most popular frozen foods in the country. Hector Boiardi came to America from Italy at the age of 16, on the 14th of May 1916. He first moved to New York, working in the kitchen of the Plaza Hotel, with his brother Paolo. He eventually made his way to becoming head chef. He even prepared the homecoming meal served by President Wilson at the White House, for 2,000 returning World War I soldiers. Boiardi took his skills to Cleveland, Ohio, opening up his first restaurant, called the Gardens of Italy. It was located on East 9th Street. Patrons of his restaurants liked his spaghetti sauce so much, they often asked to take some home with them. Boiardi decided he would sell his spaghetti sauce, bottling them in cleaned-up milk bottles. In 1927, Boiardi met Maurice and Eva Wiener, who were patrons of his restaurant and owners of a local grocery store chain. They helped Boiardi develop a process for canning and distributing his food at scale. They also helped to procure the distribution of his sauce throughout the United States. Soon Hector Boiardi's sauce and other products were being stocked nationwide. The name Chef Boiardi would become synonymous with what would become a popular household staple. Dave Thomas came back from the Korean War and began his career in the fast food industry. He started working for Colonel Harlan Sanders, who opened his business, Kentucky Fried Chicken, in the 1950s. Sanders needed someone to bring his business to franchisees in the Midwest. Thomas was his man for that job. Thomas helped to get the franchisees set up, and he was the person who convinced Sanders to be the spokesperson for Kentucky Fried Chicken. This made Sanders a household name and made his restaurants and fried chicken popular all over. Thomas wanted to branch out into his own business after helping to make Sanders's business a success. Inspired by his love of the square hamburgers and thick malt shakes from his favorite childhood restaurant, the Kewpie Burger, Thomas started his own restaurant, serving similar square burgers and thick shakes he called Frosties, at a restaurant in Columbus, Ohio, that he opened on the 15th of November 1969. He named the restaurant Wendy's after his 8-year-old daughter, Melinda Lou. His daughter had trouble saying her full name, so she used the nickname Wender instead. But Thomas did not think Wender's old-fashioned hamburgers sounded quite right, so he changed it to Wendy's old-fashioned hamburgers. Thomas would later admit that he regretted naming the restaurant after his daughter, as it put a lot of pressure on her. Just like what he did for Colonel Sanders, Thomas became the spokesperson for his own company. People really connected to his self-effacing and easygoing demeanor. He made over 800 commercials, which helped to make Wendy's the third-largest burger chain in the U.S. One of the most popular commercials that did not have Thomas as its star was the "Where's the Beef" commercials from the 1980s. Thomas's original restaurant in Columbus closed its doors in 2007. The artifacts and displays from that restaurant were moved to the company's headquarters in Dublin, Ohio. Besides Wendy's and Stouffer's, other famous restaurants and chains that started in Ohio include these popular ones. Arby's, which opened its first sandwich shop in 1964, in Boardman, Ohio, and is now one of the most popular fast food restaurants in the country. Buffalo Wild Wings got its start when its founders, Jim Disbrow and Scott Lowry, moved to Columbus from Buffalo, New York. They thought the city of Columbus needed a good wing restaurant, so they opened their own, on High Street in Columbus. Now there are 1,000 locations throughout the country. Bob Evans was founded and headquartered in Columbus. It operated its restaurants, claiming that it ran its business the Ohio way, by treating strangers like friends. It is the place one goes for comfort food wherever one can find a Bob Evans restaurant. Skyline Chili is a Cincinnati-based business that is famous for its cheese conies and unique chili. They were one of the first restaurants to use their chili as a topping on spaghetti. Skyline put this style of the 3- or 4-way chili on the map. Charlie's Philly Cheesesteaks, first opened in 1986, near Ohio State University. After OSU alum, Charlie Shinn tried his first Philly cheesesteak while in college. He decided to open up his own Philly cheesesteak business near the OSU campus. It was an instant success, and his business only grew from there, with several hundred stores located throughout the country. So many famous people were from Ohio. There are too many to mention in this video. But here are just a few. Author, Toni Morrison. Feminist activist, Gloria Steinem. Comic book author, Harvey Pekar. Author, Norman Vincent Peale. Actor, Jim Backus. Halle Berry. Game show host and actor, Drew Carey. George Clooney. Comedian, Tim Conway. The man who coined the term, rock and roll, Alan Freed. Clark Gable. Actor, Joel Grey. Catherine Horn. Allison Janney. Paul Newman. Ed O'Neill. Talk show host, Jack Parr. Sarah Jessica Parker. Dean Martin. Bob Hope. Actress, Dorothy Dandridge. Olympic runner, Jesse Owens. Doris Day. Actress, Ruby Dee. Comedian, Phyllis Diller. Talk show host, Phil Donohue. Talk show host and singer, Mike Douglas. Television newsman, Hugh Downs. Talk show host and actor, Arsenio Hall. Actress, Margaret Hamilton. Olympic skater, Scott Hamilton. Actor, Woody Harrelson. Games show host and comedian, Steve Harvey. Hal Holbrook. Katie Holmes. Terrence Howard. John Lithgow. Actors, Rob and Chad Lowe. Comedian, Paul Lynde. Martin Mull. Luke Perry. Monica Potter. Tyrone Power. Cowboy, Roy Rogers. Actor, Alan Ruck. Deborah Winger. Comedian, Jonathan Winters. Molly Shannon. Martin Sheen. Sports announcer, Jimmy the Greek. Comedian, Hal Sparks. Talk show host, Jerry Springer. Actor, Philip Michael Thomas. Fred Willard. Nick Galfus. Musicians, Benjamin Orr and Rick Ocasek, of the musical group The Cars. Singer, Bobby Womack. Singer, Chrissy Hind. Singer, Eric Carmen. Polka King, Frankie Yankovic. Musician, Jim Brickman. Singer, John Legend. Rocker, Marilyn Manson. Composer, Michael Feinston. Singer, Tracy Chapman. Singer, Michael Stanley. Macy Gray. Boz Scaggs. James Ingram. Composer, Henry Mancini. Singer, Johnny Paycheck. Dwight Yoakam. Actor and singer, Danny Thomas. Founder of Progressive Insurance, Peter B. Lewis. Jack Warner of the Warner Brothers Studio. Joe Shoaster and Jerry Siegel, the creators of Superman. Roger Ailes, the former Fox News executive. Paul Brown, coach of the Cleveland Browns, and owner of the Cincinnati Bengals. Football player, Larry Zonker. Baseball player, Roger Clemens. Basketball player, LeBron James. Basketball player, Steph Curry. Football player, Len Dawson. Football player, Dan Dierdorf. Football players, Bob and Mike Gillick. Football coach, Woody Hayes. Football coach, Lou Holes. Football player, Bernie Kosar. Basketball coach, Bobby Knight. Boxing promoter, Don King. Golfer, Jack Nicklaus. Race car driver, Bobby Rahar. Wrestler, Macho Man Randy Savage. Football coach, Don Shula. Football player, Roger Staubach. Baseball owner, George Steinbrenner. Baseball player, Cy Young. Writer, Joe Esterhaus. Baby doctor and author, Dr. Benjamin Spock. Animal handler of the Columbus Zoo, Jack Hanna. Larry Flint, publisher of Hustler magazine. Ted Turner, the first owner of CNN. Serial killer, Jeffrey Dahmer. Irish mobster, Danny Green. Cult leader, Charles Manson. General George Armstrong Custer. General William Tecumseh Sherman. And the famous female sharpshooter, Annie Oakley. Thanks for watching this episode of What Makes the State of Ohio So Special. If I missed anything, or if you want to share your own interesting facts about the state of Ohio, please leave a comment below. And please don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Please also look out for more videos of this kind. We intend to highlight all 50 states and U.S. territories. So, stay tuned for more videos, and please share them with your friends. Thanks again and see you soon.